My name is Michael Ruckman. I'm the president and CEO of Synteo Incorporated, an American company, but we have quite a presence in Russia. We're in Moscow today with my guest, colleague, and friend, Marcus Guest. Maybe say a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm based here in Moscow. I run a company called PowerMaps, which I'm pioneering across Russia. Probably quite opportune at the moment. It's about helping people understand how to deal with a changing environment. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So Marcus and I have been having a number of, let's say, discussions, conversations about what's happening right now with coronavirus and the current state of crisis on the planet and how people are reacting, and specifically how companies are reacting, and whether this is an opportunity or a threat or both for business. How we actually get through the time of crisis, and does that create opportunities for businesses, for people, for change in general coming out of the crisis. So we've been having this conversation for the last couple of weeks, and we thought we really need to take this online as people are working more and more from home. Maybe people are out of work, maybe people are a little bit bored, and we thought we could bring some topics to life that maybe would be interesting to talk about.
I think people are a little bit scared and a little bit confused as well at the moment. So what we've been doing, both of us, with our businesses, is trying to bring new ideas into business. And we've always thought that's going to take time. Talking of years, those years are now months, and for some companies, weeks. So perhaps it's not just about responding to boredom, it's about responding to uncertainty and fear and what the hell are we going to do next? And we think we have some, not so much answers, but some directions that we can help people think about, which
Absolutely.
is why we wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah. So maybe we start with some of the ideas that we've been covering for the last little bit. We've been talking about leadership, we've been talking about change, we've been talking about different forms of how to look at strategy in times of crisis versus times of uncertainty. We've talked about chaos, complexity, the complicated, the simple, Cynefin framework, and so on. And a lot of these things have very relevant context in what's going on today. So what we talked about a little bit earlier was really thinking about the chaos that's happening around the globe right now, and people panicking, and the mass purchase of toilet paper, which nobody really understands why. But however, it goes down to primitive human behavior and the fact that we don't want to have this sense of loss or being left out. We also talked about this context of the environment that's created, and how this fear that's everywhere and is creating the panic and so on, and what maybe governments should be doing and companies should be doing to create an environment that's not driven by fear, but an environment, feeling of safety that's there. So we've been talking a lot about the environment that's created by this kind of crisis situation, and how the fear of what's going to happen and the uncertainty of what will happen in the future is creating this panic. And it's really the uncertainty, I think. So the question is, do we think this is something that's going to pass over in a couple months and everything will go back to normal? Or does this change everything for good and we all have to adapt to the new normal? And what do we do in that situation?
Yeah, so I think we come to our perspective, which is this changes everything. So you mentioned Cynefin, so if we look at chaotic situations, these are temporary, these pass. There isn't enough energy to keep things going, but what does it change into afterwards? So either we're going to try to scramble back up the hill to where we were before, into the types of businesses that we had, into an economic system that we had, which was now being exposed as very fragile, or do we move into a place of trying to discover new ways of approaching things? So I think when we discussed, we said, well, it's probably beyond our scope to discuss things at a national level, but it's definitely within our sweet spot to discuss things at a business level.
Yep.
So does your business then start to try to recreate what it was before, or should it use the new normal to actually start
To adapt.
to adapt,
To evolve,
to discover
yeah.
new things?
Well, and that's the interesting thing. Probably one of the more interesting pieces that we talked about over time was this ability for businesses to maybe drive the change that they've been trying to achieve for maybe years, decades even, in the wake of this type of crisis. So the crisis brings about chaos, fear, uncertainty, and so on. As things start to stabilize, whether that's in 3 months, 6 months, a year, who knows, the reality of going back to everything the way it was, even if it is possible, probably isn't the best idea. So if we think about this concept of companies sending everybody home, not just the concept of people being laid off in mass, but the concept of companies sending everybody home to work almost in isolation, this forces levels of remote collaboration that haven't been achieved in most companies around the world. Mm-hmm. So if we think about that in a sense, if we achieve that over the course of several months, that teams are able to work, collaborate, be productive, generate results, and so on remotely, why would we ever want to bring people back into a full-time office environment? And the opportunity here is to dramatically change the cost structure of how businesses are managed.
I think some are trying to create cost efficiencies by getting rid of the people and keeping the offices. And the offices don't work without the people. So it's probably a much better idea to look at making sure you keep the people, because that's what's going to create your business afterwards.
Absolutely.
The cost can come when you start to say, do we need all this space?
Yeah, I would even challenge to say, let's take a look at the amount of time that people are working individually and people are actually collaborating. Mm-hmm. And you could probably take most positions in a company and say, okay, people are working 60, 70, 80% individually. Mm-hmm. Why do we need them to be in the same physical space? And if we can learn to collaborate remotely in an efficient way, do we really need to get together every day? And if that is the case, then how do we actually restructure the need for physical space?
Yeah, I think there's a fear though with leaders is about a lack of control. Mm-hmm. So if you can't see what people are doing, then you can't control what they're doing.